Hello and welcome to the Transformation Manager blog. Today we're going to have a look at some alternate approaches and the cascade hierarchy. So let's begin. So as we can see from last time, we were moving the cost currency into the turbine cost. We'd log some information out using log4j, and we'd log that out to a file we'd defined in a log4j properties called main file. And we were also looking up a currency value using our lookup get standard, which was actually a database lookup, in this case going to our target database against our standards table, and it's going to look up against the original value and pull out our standard. Set the standard value in our local variable, and then depending on what we had, if we had a value in that standard, we could set the currency to that, and if we didn't, then we just set the currency directly from our source in this case. And just to refresh our memories of exactly what we had, we can connect up to our input files that we're using, and again we can view the data for these. So we can see we had a UKP as an original value. The standard for that would be the GBP, and if we have a look at our turbine blades, we can see that for our currency we have a USD. There we have that UKP that we'll probably want to standardize, a GBP and a USD. So three are okay, and that one line there that we want to standardize. So initially we did a lookup from our database to standardize that line from standards on the database side. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at creating a procedure that will allow us to use our source input file. We don't necessarily have to create a procedure for this, but in this case we'll just look at how we do, and we'll add some login to that procedure as well, just to show you how these procedures can be extended and start to build up. So firstly, we can comment out our original section, and we can just put a comment above that. So that was to set the currency from lookup, and now we're going to set the currency from procedure. Okay, so what we need to do, we're looking at the turbine blades here. We can see we've got the standards file as well. So what we could do is create a relationship between them from the turbine blade, which contains our cost and currency, to our standards. So let's begin by doing that. So we'll create a new relationship from our turbine blades to our standards, and we shall call it Q currency standards. And for the inverse, all I'm going to do is prefix it with an I. For the cardinality, the source side 0 to 1 will be fine. On the target side, because that's for the inverse, we'll make that a many. If we have a look at the conditions, we need to add a condition, and the condition is going to be where the currency equals the original value, because that'll be the one we'll be looking up against to eventually get our standard. So there we have our relationship created, and now what we'll do is we'll create our procedure. So right clicking down here in the procedures pane, new procedure, we'll give it a name, standardized currency, return type will be a string. We'll have no target, but for this time we will have a source, and the source will be the input files. It'll be our turbine blade element we're going to have a look at. Procedures and parameters, we don't need to pass any into that. We're going to use our source element. Procedure global variables, again we've got none to pass in, so we can just hit finish. And here we have our standardized currency procedure now clean and ready for us to create. So we're going to have some similar logic in here. So we're going to have an if, control space pops us up the options. We'll take that if coding pattern, and we've seen an inbuilt function before for exist. So again, you can see if exists the standard value, then we're just going to return that straight back to us. And again, I can just drag that in just to return the standard value. Else, what we're going to do is returned directly. We can actually use the currency straight from that turbine blade. And there we have it. So it could be as simple as that. But what we're also going to do while we're here is we'll add a bit of login information to it. So again, previously we've seen the inbuilt functions such as log info. And what we can do is we can add a bit of a comment in here to our log, pass out to our log file. Currency found for blade. And we'll just append the blade ID. And we need to tell it which file we're going to, the same as we did for our other log. But we'll pass it to our other log file, in this case, the alt file that we named it. And again, we'll log info on the other side of that. So we can say directly setting currency for blade, and we'll append the blade ID, and we're going to pass it to our alt file that we've defined again in our log4j.properties. And there we go, that's it, that's all we need to do. There are other ways you could do it. You could set it up as local variables and then return the variables at the end, but for now we'll just return out of each side, and with Control S will save that, and we can swap back to our turbine cost. So here now all we need to do is drag our currency and tell it what we need to set it to, which is our standardized currency procedure. Add the semicolon onto the end, and that's that done. That's added the standardized currency procedure in, and it's going to set our currency. So it's doing exactly the same job we did here. All we've done is we've put it into a procedure. We've got some logging now in that procedure as well. So it looks a bit tidier. It's a one-line call if you want to start to reduce some of the screen real estate. And again, we could write that in a way that we could reuse elsewhere. In this case, we're actually using bits of the turbine blade. But you know, you could reuse that procedure time and time again as well. If you have any other projects that you're going to do, again, bringing in that turbine blade, that procedure will be available for those other projects as well. So once you've written it once, it's there to reuse as many times as you want. One other thing we said we were going to touch on our initial slide was our cascade hierarchy. So as we know, what we've been doing over the time, I'll just save that map, is we've been building up our structure. So we started off with our aeroplane to aeroplane, and we built that up, and then we kind of went down from there. We cascaded down through the various bits and pieces. So we went from our aeroplane to our related turbine blade, and so forth down the structure. So to view that, what we can do is right click for cascade hierarchy, and we can expand this out so we can actually see exactly what we've got there. So here we go. There's our airplane to airplane. That cascades down. We can see the line there in the map, cascade to the engine from the turbine blade. So then we're moving turbine blade information into the engine. So the engine ID, engine name out of this file. There was more information to move out the same file into our turbine. So we cascaded down. We stayed at the turbine blade, went down to the turbine. And then you can see we had two other cascades to the bolts and to the cost. So for the nuts and bolts, we actually went down again on the source side to our nuts and bolts file. But for our second one, for that turbine cost, again we stayed on that turbine blades file. Again, the cost and currency was all merged into this single file. So we stayed on that file and we moved that into the turbine cost. So that just quickly shows you the cascade hierarchy as well, and what that's doing there. So how you've structured your transform, the order in which those transforms are going to get run. So we'll start off, it'll pick up the engine, and it'll move the turbine related to that, then it'll move the bolts related to that along with the turbine cost. So once we're happy with that, again we can build it, click the little build button at the top there. Once we've done that, we can actually launch the migrator. We can hit run. We can see there it's run successfully. We can have a quick look. We are connected already. So we can view the data on our turbine cost, and there we can see that we've got our GBP, and the USDs from what we originally had as our UKP in there. So that's been corrected as we've gone along and migrated that data. This time it's been corrected using our procedure rather than our database lookup. And the procedure, of course, just used our standards flat file. So hopefully you see there's a number of different ways of doing it. The final piece to this puzzle really is to have a look what's gone to our log file, so to that main file and the alt file that we used in our procedure there. So if I just drag this in, we can have a look. So let's have a look at our main file to start with. So there we can see the cost process that we added in our previous blog. And now if we have a look at our alt file, we can see now the log information that we've set for that one. So there's directly setting currency for 3 of them, but for that one that had the UKP, you can see that there's currency found and we've set it that way. So you can see it's reporting out to the log the differences depending on whether the currency was set directly or whether it's been found from that standards file. Well, thank you very much for watching. That concludes our blog for today, and hopefully we'll see you soon.